What's going on, guys, and welcome back to another Sorare video here on the channel today. Today we have my best budget Premier League picks, and what I'm going to be doing is going through each Premier League club, all 20 of them, and taking about 5 minutes or so to sit there and really look to see if there are any budget purchases that you guys can get involved with. And yeah, there might be a few depending on the club. We're also going to be looking at how they've started the season. Do I think it's a good time to be buying any of their players? If you guys are enjoying the content, please do remember to like, subscribe if you're new. Let's get into the video for today. Yes, that is right, guys. We're going to be looking at all the Premier League teams here today on Sorare. Of course, kicking things off with Arsenal, and we're just going to be going through, looking at all of the players, looking to see if I think the prices are fair. And of course, I'm going to timestamp the video here today so you can see each individual club. Maybe there's a team you support that you're looking into. Of course, if you are new to Sorare and you're thinking about joining, then if you use my link in the description down below, then you'll get all the benefits, you know, through joining for a referral link, and of course you'll be helping me out massively as well. So thank you in advance if you do use my link to sign up. And without any further ado, we're going to kick things off with Arsenal today. And yeah, I've had a quick little look through, and something I will say before we kick off the video here today actually is, of course, when I record this, it is, actually I'm recording this on a Sunday, and of course you guys are seeing this on a Tuesday, so you know, prices can change. It's it's a live market. Prices go up, prices go down. It's just quite natural, but I'm just going to give sort of my rough overview. So of course the prices you're seeing on screen, I will also say, I believe they are like the lowest value. So you can see here, Raya, for example, is £99. That's what it's showing there. But of course, you could bid on him and win him for cheaper. So what we're going to do for the video today, because it will save me clicking into every single player, is I'm just going to use this as a rough guide of how much I think they are. And pretty much I'm going to go through every single team and give you my thoughts and opinions on some players. Of course, I've not watched every single game of every Premier League team. I've watched quite a lot though, so my knowledge is quite good. And yeah, something I do suggest with all of these clubs is having a look to see how they're currently doing. So, kicking things off with Arsenal, you can see that they beat Manchester United away from home in their opening fixture, which is great. 5-0 against Leeds, which is great. A 1-0 loss to Liverpool, bit unfortunate, and then a 3-0 win to Forest. So generally speaking, Arsenal have had a fantastic start, and I've been lucky enough to watch a few of their games, and to be honest, Arsenal, you know, they should have a good start. They are, you know, considered to be title contenders, or at least in the Champions League spots. So yeah, I'm looking through their squad here, to be honest with you guys. I really like Mosquera. I think he is a great card. Well, he is a great player, should I say. However, I think his price is a bit too high at the moment, and I think that's because obviously, I think you've kind of missed the opportunity to invest in Mosquera, in my opinion, and that is obviously because not only is he just in a purple patch at the moment because he's getting starts, but of course when Saliba comes back, Mosquera won't play, so I don't really like the look of that, depending on how long Saliba's out for, of course. But yeah, Yuri and Timber, again, another one. I feel like the ship has sailed. Had I have done this video maybe 2 weeks ago, I probably would have suggested Mosquera and Timber in that video, but of course their prices have already gone up. So hopefully in this video today I can pick out some good ones. And my first, I actually have two suggestions from Arsenal. Again, you know, do your own research and, you know, buy who you like, ultimately is the best thing to do on Sorare. But my first one is Miles Lewis-Skelly. And the reason for that is because currently, right now, you can see there's one on the market for £5.45. And I just feel like, obviously, World Cup coming up, he's going to be, you know, really trying to get that starting spot in the side. And of course, at the moment, he's been bested to Calafiori at the moment. But you can see he's a young fullback for England. And when he did play last season, he done pretty well. And I don't anticipate him, you know, being on the bench for much longer. Although I will say that, of course, Calafiori is a good player. And to be honest, they'll probably share minutes quite a lot, which is why he's quite cheap. However, I would say that I think that is a good purchase, in my opinion, for around £5. And the other player I want to pick out here is Noddy Madueke, and again, unfortunately, I wish I'd done this video um, a week or two ago because he probably would have been even cheaper than he is now, but still at £25, I think Madueke is a steal. And if you're an Arsenal fan and you've watched the games, you will know what I'm talking about. He's a great player, of course. He's on the right at the moment, covering for Saka whilst he's injured. Even when Saka comes back, he's on the left for me. I think he's way better than Martinelli in that. So yeah, if I've had a look at all of the players, to be honest with you guys, and Noni Madueke is one I definitely like. I'm not a massive fan of Martinelli, so I wouldn't suggest. Of course, Saka, Rice, Gyökeres. It's boring for me to sit here and suggest players like that. So yeah, Madueke and Lewis Skelly are the Arsenal picks for me. Up next is Aston Villa, and of course they have had a bit of a rough start to the Premier League, and I believe the only team I think actually in England that have yet to score a goal in their competition. Of course, 0-0 with Newcastle, which is actually a decent result considering the red card that they got. A poor loss away from home against Brentford, an even poorer loss away, at home against Palace, and then of course the game yesterday. Again, like I said, recording this on Sunday. They did draw 0-0 to Everton, which is not a completely terrible result either. I'm sure Villa fans will not be too mad at the Everton and the Newcastle result, but these two are quite poor. They should definitely be at least scoring in these two fixtures, in my opinion. So, yeah, with that being said, take that into mind if you are, looking to invest into Aston Villa, that they have had a very poor start, and of course that will be reflected in the prices of some of these players. In my opinion, the goalkeeper you should stay away from because it's quite hard to tell what's happening. You would assume Emi Martinez is going to be in net for them, but yeah, who knows with what happened with him last season. Then looking forward, I think Ezri Konsa is a great shout. And to be fair, it's not a terrible price to pay for someone like Konsa because he is pretty much nailed. I think no matter what not only is he nailed in the centre back position, but should Matty Cash get injured, he can play right back as well. And Konsa does get the odd call up for England. So to be honest, I think £11 is very fair for Konsa. To be fair, and Aston Villa, like we've just said, defensively quite good. Mings as well, another good one, and quite cheap as well. And the only problem for Mings is he'll be fighting for his position with Pau Torres. However, in my opinion, I think Mings is he's clear of Pau Torres in my opinion. However, I could see them rotating, and obviously Lindelof coming into the fold as well will be good cover. But in my opinion, I think Mings and Konsa are probably the two starting centre backs. Digne and Matson just rotate too much, in my opinion. And Tielemans is great, but again, too expensive. Harvey Elliott, I think, is phenomenal as well. Again, I think the ship has sailed a little bit of Harvey Elliott in terms of his price. Seems a little bit steep in my opinion. Maybe you guys could look to wait and see. Maybe he has a bad game week or two and his price drops a little bit. Maybe someone to look at, because I do think Harvey Elliott is fantastic. But yeah, just a little bit expensive. Like I would rather have Konsa as opposed to Elliott because Konsa is a bit more nailed. And then yeah, apart from that, Kamara and Onana get injured a bit too much. Watkins, of course, hasn't scored yet, and for £20 seems a bit ridiculous. And yeah, Rodgers, to be honest, not the best scorer on Sorare, but he does play for England, and he does play really well, just in general, not just Sorare, just actual football. So yeah, I think my two suggestions for Aston Villa is going to be Ezri Konsa, and I'd say Rodgers, but it just depends if you think Aston Villa are going to start scoring anytime soon. But yeah, I think in my opinion, definitely Ezra Konsa, and then maybe Rodgers. Depends on how much you like Aston Villa. Up next is Bournemouth, and yeah, I do know a lot about Bournemouth. I've actually watched all of their games this season, so this should be a fun one. They kick things off with a 4-2 loss, opening day fixture against Liverpool. They actually didn't perform too bad in that game. Just, it's Liverpool at Anfield. It's going to be a tough game, of course. Then they beat Wolves 1-0. Good result. Probably should have been more considering Tavernier scored so early on in the game. Then actually managed to beat Spurs 1-0, which is a great result away from home. Beating Thomas Frank, who, of course, has got off to such a good start with Spurs. And that is just, that is a justice to how good Iriola and Bournemouth are right now, because Spurs are definitely not the Spurs that they were last season. And of course, this weekend beat Brighton 2-1, which again, another great result. And all in all, Bournemouth are looking phenomenal. And on Sorare, I can't actually show you guys the page that I've been showing for the other collections, because I do actually have a Bournemouth collection myself, so I'm going to have to just do it on the market for this one. I'm sorry if that offends anyone's eyes, but yeah. So looking at the players here in the list, and I've skipped over the first row because a lot of these guys are just DMPs or I don't really think are worth it. Ryan Christie at £1.25 is an absolute steal, and I do recommend him because although he wasn't in the squad last game week, he did play for Scotland. Now, I would wait maybe just a minute or two. Oh, I'll say a minute. Sorry, guys. I would wait maybe a week or two to hear why he wasn't in the squad last game. Perhaps he has re-upset his injury. However, I think the only reason I'm massively suggesting him is because he's literally £1. Like, if he was more expensive than £1, then I'd be saying maybe not. But for how good he was for them last season, it's just, in my opinion, for £1, it's worth the risk. Of course, you're going to have to wait with him. He might only get back in the squad, in a month or so or whatever. But at £1, you can't really complain. So yeah, Christie is definitely a suggestion for me. Tyler Adams very cheap for someone that starts a lot. However, he's just not the most inspiring pick on Sorare because he just doesn't score that well. He scores 40-50 every game. Yeah, Scott's decent, but I anticipate Christie might be able to get Scott's spot come the back end of the season. Or, yeah, of course, Alex Scott could potentially take Adams' spot, but Adams has been so good for them. So yeah, we'll wait and see what happens there. Tavernier's a good one, although the past couple of games he's not been, well, since he scored against Wolves, he's not been too fantastic, which is a bit weird. But yeah, Kluivert, another really good one, coming back from injury, and he will almost certainly fly into the team. So, yeah, I think my suggestions, and Truffert is fantastic as well. So, yeah, there's a lot of really great pickups from Bournemouth because in general they're deemed to be one of the lower tier clubs in England, even though they've got a great manager and they play great football. And yeah, you can see from their results they're doing well. So, I actually have 3 picks from Bournemouth, and that would be Ryan Christie, Justin Kluivert, and Truffert. So yeah, 3 budget picks from Bournemouth, and it's because it's like the perfect club for Sorare in my opinion, because they're cheap, they play well, and they're good players. Up next is Brentford, and let's have a look to see how they've started off their season then. Now, they lost their opening game to Nottingham Forest 3-1. Yes, it's they're away from home. Maybe you'd like to get points in, but I don't think they'll be too mad at that one. Then they pick up a 1-0 win against Villa, a great result for them. So after the first 2 games, they'd be pretty happy with that, I'm sure. Then the next game was away from home against Sunderland, and it's a 2-1 loss. Not the most ideal result, especially against Sunderland. They'd probably be hopeful for at least a point in that game. And then, of course, this weekend, they managed to pick up a draw against Chelsea, which is a fantastic result at home. So, yeah, I think Brentford know that when they play at home, they're really going to have to try and perform as good as they can. And if you are looking at Brentford sides on Sorare, then, yeah, you will be happy to know that they are quite cheap. I would say this is potentially a sort of club you would look at, maybe a goalkeeper if you are a budget manager. However, Kelleher, I think, is a decent keeper. I just don't think Brentford are that good defensively. That's why I'm not going to suggest a goalkeeper. However, I might, in the future teams, have a little bit more of a look into the keepers for you guys. However, looking at their squad, I do really like Sepp van der Berg. Very, very cheap. And, again, a good player. However, I just think Brentford defensively are not the best, so I probably wouldn't recommend going for any of their defenders purely based on the fact that I think most teams will be able to score against them. Maybe only utility for them might be in home fixtures that are favourable, which won't be many throughout the season. And we have Kevin Schade here, who actually is going to be my first budget suggestion for Brentford because he's pretty much a nailed starter for Brentford, performs pretty well, scores the odd goal here or there, and for £5 I think it's quite fair. However, looking at the other Brentford players, I really can't see anyone else that I would recommend in terms of like good players for Sorare. Of course, like they do have. I'm not naive to I'm not denying the fact that these players aren't good, if that makes sense. Like Damsgaard, Atara, I know they're good. I just don't think their prices are good, if that makes sense. Obviously, looking at this now, this could change. And like, I think some of the defensive pieces are okay in terms of like prices and how good they are, like Vanderberg, Coyote, and even Nathan Collins. Like I feel like they're decent players, but I just not a massive fan of that defense for Brentford. So I think my budget pick is going to be Kevin Schade. Up next is Brighton and Hove Albion, and before we go any further with the video, I do want to say to you guys that I do this sort of stuff a lot with all of my members on the channel, whether that's over a Discord call or Twitter DMs. I also do member only videos and member live streams for all these budget picks and stuff for the Premier League. So if you guys do want any exclusive help with your gallery and building lineups and strategy in the Premier League, and especially Sorare Premier League in season, all that sort of stuff, then I do highly recommend becoming a member on this channel. You do that by clicking down below, clicking the join button, and then you can even just get the lowest membership, and I'll be at your service for all things lineup strategy and picks and all of that, and every single game week, of course. I'll help with lineup builds and everything like that. So just wanted to get that out in this video because I think this is a really good video for people that might be perhaps new to Sorare or trying to build a strategy and they need some help and that sort of stuff. With that being said, we're going to be looking at Brighton next, and yeah, opening game of the season, 1-1 to Fulham. It's honestly, they might look at that and be a little bit upset, but Fulham I think are quite big like dark horses in the Premier League. Like, not many people think they're that good, but I don't think they play terrible football, to be honest. So 1-1's not a completely end of the world result. 2-0 to Everton, not ideal when you don't score, of course. However, 2-1 last minute winner against Man City is a fantastic result. And I think if you said, if a Brighton fan looked at these three results at the start of the season and you said you get 4 points from it, I think they'd be pretty happy with that. Maybe the points would have come in a bit of a different order than they would have anticipated, but yeah. And then of course this weekend, unfortunately lost to Bournemouth, but honestly Bournemouth are quite a good team, so I don't think it's not the end of the world, although a team like Brighton would be looking for at least a point there. And yeah, in terms of Sorare, let's have a little look then. I will say Verbruggen's price is extremely cheap at the moment. That is because, of course, he has been, well, Brighton defensively haven't looked the best, but he does also still play in net for, for Netherlands, and for that price, seems a bit too low in my opinion. So I think actually, here we go, my first budget keeper pick in this video is actually going to be Bart Verbruggen for £30. I honestly feel like that is a bit of a steal for a starting Premier League goalkeeper in season, and I don't think Brighton are too bad. I mean, obviously, don't get me wrong, defensively they've not started the season well, but I absolutely have full faith in that defence. They just need to make sure that Matt Sweefer is not playing right back, and they'll be fine. With that being said, I think Van Hecker is a great centre back. However, he really needs a new partner because, in my opinion, Lewis Dunk is not it. And I'm sure the manager won't take long to realise that probably Bassagli or anyone else is probably a little bit better alongside Van Heck. So yeah, 30's an interesting one, not really getting much of a chance. But yeah, all in all, I'd say lucky I didn't make this video earlier, because I would have definitely suggested to go and pick yourself up a Hinchelwood, because I think he's fantastic. However, I believe he just got injured, so bad timing for him. But all in all, I would say Verbruggen definitely a great pickup, and of course for Sorare, it's usually quite good if you buy a goalkeeper to then buy a defender to stack with the goalkeeper. So I kind of have to suggest a defender here for you guys, and I'm probably going to say Van Heck, because if Verbruggen's scores improve, you like to assume that Van Hecker's scores also improve. So, mark my words. I mean, you can come back to this video. As it stands, Van Heck and Verbruggen, I'm looking at it, they're £36. It'll be interesting to see in a month or so if Brighton perform well or whatever, to come back and see what their prices are like. Of course, that isn't the main. I guess that's not the only selling point to Sorare, because of course you could then use them players, and if they perform well, you earn money that way. But yeah, anyway. And then looking forward, I would say actually to stay away from the midfield. Not all of them, but I would say to stay away from midfielders and forwards, generally speaking, for Brighton, because they do rotate quite a lot. So it's always quite risky to have them. However, if I was to pick up any of them, Minter, see, his price has gone too high for me at the moment. Like, I was suggesting him to some of my members about a month or so ago at, like, I think it was like £9, £8. He's almost double that now. So you can tell that these videos might be able to help you guys out, but yeah. Matoma's also a good one, but again, a little bit expensive. So I actually don't think I would recommend any forward or midfielder. Because even like I like Ayari, but he just rotates a bit too much. I know he got subbed on early because Hinchelwood's injury, but yeah, I think if I had to pick a midfielder or forward, I would pick Ayari. But no, my budget picks for this one is going to be Van Heck and Verbruggen. Up next is Burnley, and they started off their season not the best with a 3-0 loss to Spurs. However, turned it around with a 2-0 win against Sunderland, of course at home, and I think this is going to be the key theme to these bottom tier clubs like Brentford, Burnley, Sunderland. They're going to really have to perform at home, so bear that in mind when you are building your Sorare squads, that home advantage is quite big in the Premier League. And you can see a 3-2 loss to Manchester United, another relegation scrap team with them. So, yeah, unfortunate result there. They'd probably be trying to get a draw in that one, but yeah. No, in all seriousness, not a terrible result for Burnley. And as things stand, as we are talking, as I am recording this video, they're currently drawing 0-0 to Liverpool. I probably will curse them and they might concede as literally as I'm recording this, but yeah, so currently not doing too bad, and of course that is because they are at home, and yeah, that goes to show home fixtures are quite important, especially for these relegation sides. With that being said, I don't really mind the defenders slash the goalkeepers for Burnley, because I think for them home fixtures, they're not bad picks, to be honest. The forwards, I'll be honest, Anthony is very decent. However, at £15, you'd just rather have you'd rather have Minter or anyone else really for that price. And the other forwards are not really my cup of tea personally. So yeah, Anthony's the only one that I might look at there, and yeah, I would say potentially if you are thinking about buying Burnley players, I would say I'd recommend probably Estev and Dubravka as a sort of defensive stack, as I don't think going forward they'd be the best. And to be honest, if I had Dubravka and Estev, I would definitely recommend focusing on their home fixtures and utilising them in their matches. Up next is Chelsea, and they start off their season with a ball draw 0-0, and then proceed to score a lot of goals after that one in a 5-1 win at West Ham. However, West Ham not the best team, so yeah, I think after the first two games, Chelsea probably disappointed not to have 6 points. They do beat Fulham in a routine victory as well, 2-0. what you would probably expect from Chelsea. And then they actually go and draw to Brentford 2-2. So to be honest, I would say I would obviously you can see here that Chelsea have picked up a a total, or why is my brain just not working? A total of 8 points, sorry, out of their first 4 games. I think they would have been happier with 9 points, so maybe they would have taken one loss for the draw. However, it's not the worst results in the world. So, yeah, all in all, especially with the injuries and stuff that they've had. So, bearing that in mind, looking at the Chelsea squads then, again, obviously quite an expensive club, as we can see. And as things stand, I probably... Ooh, actually interesting to look at some of these prices, to be honest. I think Reece James and Gusto, similar to Digne and Maatsen at Aston Villa, probably not worth it, the amount of, like, because they share in game time, so that's not the best thing on Sorare, to be honest. Looking at their midfield, I really like Buonanotte. I just don't know if he'll get the game time that he deserves really at Chelsea, because of course they have so many players. Looking forward, again, same with Andre Santos. I think he's a good player, just perhaps just not going to get the game time, unfortunately. Yeah, to be honest, the prices are... I'm struggling to see a crazy value player. The only one I could see here is Gittins. However, Gittins has not really had the greatest of starts at Chelsea, and I know the fans are not really rating him so much so far. So I would say, having a quick glance over the Chelsea boys here, I'd say perhaps Andre Santos. You could, well, no, because I just don't see him getting a look in, unfortunately. So I can't sit here and say that. Um, Tough one. I think Hato's good as well, but again, it's just the game time that he's going to struggle with here. Um, Potentially Levi Cole-Will. I don't know, although I think his ACL he's done. I know he's injured at the moment. I don't know how serious the injury is, but Levi Cole-Will is a good player. But of course, if he's out for a long period of time, then it would absolutely not be worth it. Fofana is an interesting one, isn't he? As he seems to get injured a lot. However, very, very cheap. So if he does manage to get back into the squad, could be a good one. But yeah, I think based on everything here, even though, again, Gittins is probably going to get rotated, he's not had the best of starts. I think if I had to pick anyone here out of the Chelsea side, I probably would have to say Jamie Gittins based on the prices of other players. I know, obviously, like I said, Estavial's been brilliant, and Garnacho, or not Garnacho, sorry, Pedro's been fantastic as well. But just looking at the prices, yeah, in terms of budget picks, I think the best is probably Gittins, even though he's going to get rotated a lot. So, yeah. So, moving away from Chelsea, of course, perhaps not the best team to be stacking on Sorare, just for money wise anyway. Of course, a great club, but just hard to pick out some good budget players for that team. Looking at Palace now then, and yeah, of course, they're the ones that drew to Chelsea. Great result for them. Palace also getting a draw to Nottingham Forest. Yeah, not ideal, but a 3-0 win to Villa is fantastic, and 0-0 draw to Sunderland this weekend, not ideal either. But I will say a reoccurring theme here of great defence. Yeah, a great defence with 3 clean sheets out of 4, and we all know how great of a manager Glasner is. However, I would say £55 for Dean Henderson, not ideal. I will say their defence is pretty much nailed to be Munoz, Lacroix, Gahey, Mitchell, and Richards. However, personally, I'm not a massive fan of Mitchell. I think people are starting to see more and more now why I'm not a fan of him. But I know a lot of people rate him as well. So, if you like Tyrick Mitchell, then he would be a good purchase here at about £7 comparative to the other defenders. Obviously Gahey, we know how good he is, and Lacroix and Munoz. But comparative to them, you can see he's half the price of Richards. So, based on that, you would say that he is a budget pick. but I'm not going to recommend him personally because I don't think he's that great. Moving or looking forward, then we would. I think Raksaki has actually just got a move, and I do really like him. I saw him play for Charlton in real life, and he was pretty good. So maybe someone to look at. Kamada, yeah. He's okay. He's okay. Roman Essie is an interesting one to see if he gets a bit more game time. Quite cheap as well, and quite young. Good young talent. Maybe he needs a loan. Justin Devaney very good as well. I think on the contrary to Chelsea. I think Palace are quite a good team to stack on Sorare because you could buy a pretty cheap, decent stack. Ismaili Sarr unfortunately injured, but is another great one to be honest. So yeah, to be honest, there's a lot of great picks here from Palace. But if I had to, even Will Hughes, incredibly underrated as a footballer. And £2 is crazy. Wharton is great as well, but has injury problems. Um, yeah, I would probably say Mateta's a little bit expensive. I'd probably say, depending on the severity of Ismail Sarr's injury, again, I'm not too informed on how injured he is, but definitely if he's only out for a month or so, or a couple of weeks, I'd say £12 for Ismail Sarr is a steal. Wharton as well, obviously depending on injury, but another great price to be fair for a great midfielder. So I'd probably say them two. I know they both are injured, but still you can if you're watching this now, you're thinking about buying them. £20 for a potential future stack of Palace midfielder and forward together is not too bad. And I would say if you're looking to go defensive with them, then I probably recommend. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I would recommend any of them, and if I did, maybe it would be Munoz or Lacroix, as opposed to Richards or Mitchell, in my opinion. Probably Munoz, to be fair. So yeah, that is Crystal Palace. Everton up next, and yeah, started off the campaign pretty poorly with a loss to Leeds. However, they turned it around as soon as they got Jack Grealish and co through the door. 2-0 win against Brighton, 3-2 win against Wolves, and do you know what? A 0-0 draw to Villa isn't the end of the world. And again, Everton, another very fun team to have on. So, of course, if you guys own Everton pieces, I know you're probably having a lot of fun right now as they were really cheap. I think they've been a bit hyped up at the moment. So perhaps not the best time to be buying into Everton. However, Pickford, starting England goalkeeper, pretty fair price to be honest, 60 quid. Just a great scorer. When Everton do bad or good, he's a great scorer. £60 a little bit expensive, but yeah, you know what you're getting with Jordan Pickford. He's going to play week in, week out, and he's going to play well. Tarkowski, an interesting one. Probably a little bit expensive, but with that being said, probably the best defender that you could put with Pickford right now. Of course, Brentford is phenomenal as well, but currently injured. Mikalenko has his moments as well. Again, dealing with injuries. So, yeah, perhaps someone's, a lot of injuries or people to look out for here in the future. Perhaps, Mikalenko, Brantwaite, maybe ones for the future to look into. I know Armstrong is decent as well. Again, I think he's dealing with injuries, or at least coming back from them. I can't remember too much. Grealish at 40 quid is ridiculous. I don't recommend that. Diblin is a good one. Does well for the youth teams in England, but again, £4 you're probably not paying that to be honest. And then yeah, Dewsbury Hall was a great one. Again, 16, a little bit expensive, isn't it? Idrissa Gana Gay is actually, interestingly, is actually pretty good. However, he has lost. Well, currently he has lost his spot, always fighting with his spot really for Ghana. Although saying that actually, they might be playing him alongside Ghana actually. I could be completely wrong there. So actually, I think the price for Idrissa Gana Gay is actually pretty fair. Dwight McNeil really unlucky to not be in the side. Of course, the signings have kept him out of the squad. Iliman Ndiaye is a phenomenal player, and he is going to be my first. Actually, he is going to be my only Everton recommendation because looking at the prices of some of these players, I feel like they're a little bit overhyped. Because you got to remember Everton are Everton at the end of the day. They're probably going to end up probably mid to high, like he's no higher than 8th in my opinion, probably no lower than 12th, like in and around that mid-table, lower top table type side. But Iliman Ndiaye is phenomenal, and I anticipate that he might even get a move in the future to a better side. Not to say Everton are bad, but everyone needs to develop their career and play perhaps in European competitions and stuff like that. So yeah, my suggestion for Everton is Iliman Ndiaye. Up next is Fulham, and Fulham actually interesting side, very underrated, dark horse type team in the Premier League, and didn't really make many signings over the transfer window. However, do really rate the manager, and I think they don't play too terrible of football. So, considering what they have at their disposal, anyway, 1-1 draw against Brighton, not too bad. 1-1 draw against Man U, not too bad. 2-0 loss to Chelsea, kind of expected, and a 1-0 win to Leeds. So you would argue that Fulham are either exceeding or meeting expectations at the moment. And in terms of Sorare, honestly, not that bad of prices for some of these players. Of course, Fulham will be currently, I would say, at a relatively high price because, of course, a great result against Leeds, especially defensively. £35 for Leno. Again, you'd probably be better off with Verbruggen. Just, you got to ask yourself, do you think Brighton are going to finish higher this season or Fulham? Realistically, most people probably going to pick Brighton. That's why I'd rather have Verbruggen. Anderson is a phenomenal passer of the football, to be honest, Joachim Anderson. And Bassi, incredibly underrated footballer. However, doesn't score that well on Sorare. However, how long before we see that translation into Sorare scores, I'm not too sure. So my first recommendation is going to be Calvin Bassi because he is very, very cheap and someone that is, if you actually watch Fulham, he is a great football player in my opinion. Just not the best score on Sorare, but like I said, we could potentially see him convert them scores. Robinson, considering he's been injured and not really been playing, probably a little bit overhyped or a little bit too expensive at the moment, in my opinion. Potentially, if Robinson's price came down, might be an interesting one to look at. And not that many cards from Fulham. Like I said, they didn't make any transfers in. Josh King, another phenomenal player. However, at £10, you're not going to be paying that, are you? So, yeah, Josh King, good player, not worth the price, in my opinion. Smith Rowe, interesting. Smith Rowe, not too bad, to be honest, but I feel like Josh King has sort of taken his place there. Wilson, interesting as well. Probably a little bit too expensive, in my opinion. And yeah, I'm not seeing a lot of other good value picks. So for me, just Calvin Bassi from Fulham. Up next, we have the extremely popular Leeds United, and they kicked off the campaign with a great 1-0 win against Everton at home. For them home supporters, I'm sure they loved that. And then they were greeted with 5-0, battering, but Arsenal, it's not, you can't be too upset with that one. A great 0-0 against Newcastle, and then an unfortunate 1-0 loss away from home against Fulham. But yet again, the theme of the video here for the newly promoted sides, at least, or the relegation candidates, are that they do well at home. And you can see here, Leeds are doing the job at home. We won't talk about away. But you have to bear that in mind if you are looking into buying any of their Sorare cards that perhaps leaning more towards the home fixtures and avoiding them for the away fixtures. Of course, the time will tell. That could obviously, they could get a good away win, but generally speaking, probably best to focus on the home fixtures. And yeah, with that being said, I think Pascal Struijk is a fantastic player for them. Again, don't really recommend having a defender from a bottom tier club though. Ampadu is another great player for them, but I know he's struggling with injuries. So yeah, I'll probably actually be more interested in looking in the midfield for Leeds, as I believe there's opportunity for them to get a lot of AA. And yeah, Longstaff, an interesting one. I probably wouldn't recommend. However, he has been putting in a good couple of shifts for Leeds recently. Aronson, another interesting one, probably not the best, and does come off the bench quite a lot, or is more of a bench player perhaps. Anton Stach is phenomenal, and he is going to be my first budget recommendation for Leeds. He is, in my opinion, their second best player, and their first best player is Tanaka, who is unfortunately injured, and I don't know how long for. But if I was to buy anything from Leeds, I probably would buy the duo here, Tanaka and Statch, at £4. However, yeah, I don't know how long Tanaka's out for, so I'm going to recommend Statch for Leeds United. Up next is Liverpool. Going to be hard to find a budget in this one, to be honest, because of course they are title contenders. So yeah, here we go. 4-2 against Bournemouth, great result. 3-2 against Newcastle away from home, great result. 1-0 against Arsenal, great result. 1-0 against Burnley, great result. And I will say, of course, like I said, I was recording this during their match, and I think I did jinx Burnley, as Salah does score in the last minute of the game, a penalty, I believe. So, yeah, bit unlucky. I think I jinxed Burnley, like I said, recording this as they play. But yeah, looking at their team, and to be honest, with clubs like this, you kind of have to take risks and perhaps pick up players that aren't starting right now but could potentially start in the future if you're looking at budget players. So yeah, I will say that in my opinion, Kirkes has had a horrible time at Liverpool so far, barring one or two games. I think he's not been the best. Obviously, I anticipate he will improve as the season goes on, but from a budget perspective or a Sorare perspective, potentially Andy Robertson might not be a bad pickup at about £7, as he could potentially start for them in the future if Kirkes doesn't pick it up. I don't think he will, don't get me wrong, and I'm not recommending Robertson, but something to think about. Because, yeah, just the price of it, you'd rather have a starter at £7, to be honest. Then looking forward at some of the other players, again, you know, Wirtz, Sobsai, obviously great players, McAllister. Yeah, good players, just not really worth the price. First recommendation would be Curtis Jones. The only reason for that is because I would like to assume that he either gets more game time than he does at the moment, or gets maybe a move in January or something like that. And at a fiver, I don't hate that because he is a phenomenal player. Liverpool fans will know how good he is. And I do really rate Curtis Jones. He just needs to not play for Liverpool. He needs to go and, you know, be a footballer anywhere else and go and play football. So, yeah. With that being said, my second suggestion follows the exact same, the exact same idea, and that is Chiesa. I think, in my opinion, again, I know Liverpool fans are not too massively keen on him. I really like Chiesa, however, just not at Liverpool. I think, again, another player that just needs to get a move. Now, like I said, really impossible for me to say, to give you guys budget picks for Liverpool because so many of their players are so expensive. But if I was to pick anyone, I probably would go with, like I said, Jones or Chiesa and pray that they get a move in the future. In terms of actual starters, if you guys are, maybe you've got a bit more of a budget and you're happy to spend a bit more money, potential players that you could buy from Liverpool, I would probably honestly look at maybe Frimpong, as I know he's, due to be back from injury, although Supersly's been doing a great job. Maybe Ryan Gravenberch. I'm not too sure, to be fair. I'm not sure if I would. Like, obviously, the obvious ones, Van Dijk, Wirtz, are like the ones that everyone wants, Salah, yada yada yada. But, yeah, I'd say probably Hugo Ekitike, actually, because, he is a great. Obviously, if you're a Liverpool fan, you watch the games, you know how good he is. I know he's blanked a couple of weeks now, but I think he's a great player. So yeah, if you've got a bit more of a budget, I would say Hugo Ekitike. Up next is Manchester City, and yeah, obviously going to be another team that it's hard to find a budget for, but I'll do the same as Liverpool and do my best. 4-0 win to Wolves, great result. 2-0 loss to Spurs, not the best result. However, Thomas Frank, we know how good his record is against City, so yeah, is what it is. A last minute loss to Brighton, not the best, and as of recording, they haven't kicked off against they haven't kicked off against United yet. However, I am going to watch this game hopefully after I finish recording this, so it'll be interesting to see yeah, how that game goes. I'm assuming that City will win, but that's my bold prediction. There you go. But we'll see, we'll see. And yeah, looking at the squads then, and to be honest, I would say unless you think City are going to win the title, maybe not the best team to invest in Sorare because, of course, they are hyped. Everyone knows how good City are, but you can tell from their opening fixtures, it might just be sometimes better to invest in the clubs that are way cheaper but still perform well, if that makes sense. So, but yeah. Anyway, moving forward. Um, it's going to be hard to pick out budget picks here, I'll be honest. Rico Lewis, decent price to be fair. Actually would recommend Rico Lewis actually for Man City because £5.50 for a good young English talent playing at one of the best sides in England. Will say, of course, he's the reason he is a fiver is because he's not in favour at the moment. Again, he's going to be similar to Curtis Jones, one you're going to have to wait for in the future. However, that is going to be the vibe of this, the top tier clubs. So yeah, Rico Lewis, very decent. Yeah, Chucky obviously injured. Teji is great, but 36 quid. Actually, 36 quid is not insane to be honest. Again, if you have a bit more budget to your name, here we go. Oscar Bob and Marmouche would be great shouts. And I'm going to say another budget pick 100% is going to be Marmouche. For £13, I know he's not been starting recently, he's not been in favour. However, I think, yeah, he's just a great player and that is extremely cheap for Marmouche. And Bob is great as well, of course. So, yeah, I would say all in all, they're going to be my Man City picks. Oscar Bob, Marmouche and Rico Lewis. Manchester United, yeah, I don't even really know where to start with this club because I don't even know if I want to look at the prices on Sorare. Because, again, one of these clubs that is perhaps seen to be a lot better than they are, which means the prices are kind of not really worth it when you look at other teams like, your Bournemouth, your Brightons, and stuff like that. But anyway, if you're a Manchester United fan, I'll give you my opinions on who I think might be a good purchase. That is the whole point of the video. 1-0 loss to Arsenal, not the end of the world. 1-1 draw to Fulham is not good enough. I don't care who you are. If you've spent the money you've spent, you should be winning that game for sure. 3-2 win to Burnley, sure, you got the job, you got the 3 points. And they're playing today, like I said, in the City one. They're playing, as I record right now, against Man City and you would assume that they probably lose this game. But if you're watching this and they draw or win, then congratulations, a great result for Manchester United. And looking at their sides or their squad and how much each player is, yeah, Lemens, actually interested to see if he does start today. I'm assuming he is going to be starting today, and I'm gonna, do a live check with you guys. Oh, it's actually Bayendir. Wow, that is surprising that they've not given him the opportunity to start. So, interesting. Anyway, yeah, because the prices you would, £45 and the keeper's not even starting is an interesting one. I know people will probably say it's his first game, you don't want to throw him in the deep end, but I mean, there's only one way for someone to learn and improve, eh? Anyway, Mazraoui, to be fair, for £6, it's not a terrible shout. Not really liking the look of the many others here. Agate at £4 is pretty fair as well. Is he starting today? Yeah, he is. Okay, I'd say and Mazraoui is as well. So I would say if you're a United fan, Ugarte, Mazraoui, fairly priced on Sorare. Yeah, Cobby is obviously great as well, but probably not for that price considering he's not even getting games at the moment. Amad Diallo, probably one of the best players at United, so £15 probably quite fair. So you could actually do it, if you're a United fan watching this, you could do a pretty cheap United stack. The only problem is you have to pray that they actually all play at the same time. But you could get, Diallo as your forward, Ugarte in there, Mazraoui as well, and and especially, I mean, against this game, if you did have Bayendir, that is an extremely cheap United stack. So actually, quite a couple of decent budget picks, which I'm quite surprised with, to be honest. I thought these players would be perhaps overhyped or overvalued. Even Sesko at 30 is not completely terrible, to be honest. So a couple of budget picks for you guys there. I'd say if I had to pick, one or two there, I'd probably say Diallo and Ugarte for me. Up next is Newcastle, and they kick off their season with a 0-0 draw against Aston Villa. Not the best result. A 3-2 loss to Liverpool. Honestly, they played pretty well in this game. Obviously, it didn't get any points, which is a bit of a heartbreak with a last-minute winner for Liverpool. However, I don't think they would be too upset with any of these. Well, the performance in these three games were fantastic. Obviously, 2 points in 3 games is not ideal. And then most recently, kind of the opposite. Didn't play that well against Wolves, but got the win. So, yeah, an interesting start to the season for Newcastle. I'd say overall, not the end of the world, considering they had all the shenanigans going on around the club. And of course, this is another team that I stack myself on Sorare, so I'm going to have to show you guys this screen as opposed to the other one that we've been looking at. And in terms of prices then, I follow Newcastle quite fondly, so I should be pretty knowledgeable on if players are worth it or not. I would say Joe Linton is a nailed starter, however he's similar to Tyler Adams, doesn't really score that well, so probably not worth it. And if you're going to pay for Joe Linton, you might as well get Tyler Adams, to be honest, for cheaper. Shaw is interesting. Lewis Hall is a great pickup in my opinion because I think he will be in the side shortly. And anything under £10 I think is fair for Lewis Hall because he is, in my opinion, similar level to Tino Livramento. However, the only problem with Lewis Hall, and you're going to have to bear this in mind when you are purchasing, if you do purchase, is that he is coming back from a big injury. And he's quite young, so it could have affected him. It is a bit of a risk. He might not perform as well as he used to, but yeah, that's part of, I guess, this whole video is to pick out. There's going to be risks, of course. So yeah, I'd say if you want to take a risk, Lewis Hall, because he could potentially be Livramento prices if he returns in the same vein. I'd say Dan Burn is a great pickup, nailed starter, playing for England. What more can you say? Just a fantastic player. So yeah, my first two recommendations would be Lewis Hall and Dan Burn. And lastly, I would actually say, you know what, £17 for Elanga is not the end of the world. I know he obviously rotated against Wolves, which is a little bit sketchy. Do you know what, even Gordon, wow, that is extremely cheap. I know Gordon's been awful recently, but yeah, damn, even Wisser at £13. There's some great budget pickups for Newcastle right now. I'm actually going to go ahead and recommend definitely Wisser at £13. That's extremely cheap. I know he's injured at the moment, but I don't think he's injured for very long. And yeah, maybe even Gordon as well, guys. You can buy a really nice Newcastle stack. Potentially this won't be a stack for the immediate future. But potentially one a little later on in the season. You could get a Dan Burn or a Lewis Hall, whoever you fancy. Wisser, Gordon up top, again, whoever you fancy. And then maybe you could get a classic Pope and or maybe Joe Linton just to save yourself some money. But yeah, that's not terribly priced, to be honest. Maybe that's me being biased because I have them cards already. But yeah, there's Newcastle. Up next is an interesting one. It is Nottingham Forest, and of course they've just sacked their manager. And for those of you guys that follow the channel fondly, you will know I did call Nuno to get sacked first, and you heard it here first, second, whatever. The second manager to get sacked is going to be Potter, Graham Potter at West Ham. There's my prediction. But anyway, yeah, manager sacked. 3-1 win against Brentford. 1-1 draw against Palace. Not terrible result. Well, pretty good. 3-0 loss to West Ham is not ideal. It's very not ideal at all. And a 3-0 loss, of course, for Ange in his first game against Arsenal. Probably expected. So yeah, thinking about that on Sorare then, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and do it. I I'm going to have to say Matt Sells is a great price. Although I will say Ange is probably not the most ideal manager. You know, for defensively, if you know what I mean. But hey, who knows? He could turn it around. He could magically become a very good defensive manager. But yeah, Matt Sells, at least they'll be good for Europa League. But yeah, £22, I'd say is pretty fair for a starting goalkeeper in the Premier League. So yeah. And then if you were to buy Matt Sells, of course you've got to get a defender to go with him. And to be honest, pick your poison. Milenkovic, Williams, Murillo, all the same price, and all three of them, whoever you prefer, I would go with that. Neco Williams for me probably edges it, especially because he has international utility as well. So yeah, my first two recommendations would be Sells and Neco Williams if you're thinking about defensively stacking Forest, although bear in mind it is Ange, so it could be perhaps a more offensive team. With that being said, Gibbs White being more expensive than Anderson is interesting. Although I know Anderson is having the time of his life right now, but generally speaking, Gibbs White tends to score better on Sorare, although, like I said, hasn't recently, of course. But potentially something to think about, Gibbs White. And you know what? That would be my last recommendation for Forest. £12 for Gibbs White, who is, arguably their best player at the club. So, yeah, a little bit risky because, of course, Ange is in. We don't know how well they're going to perform. But, yeah, £10 for their best player. It's a decent pick. Getting to the back end of the teams now in the Premier League. And yeah, Sunderland up next. 3-0 win to West Ham. Great result at home. Fans would be buzzing with that one. Good opening day fixture. Lost to Burnley. Not ideal, but they won't care because they beat Brentford 2-1 at home. Again, similar occurring theme here with the newly promoted sides trying to do well at home. However, they did pick up a good 0-0 result against Palace this weekend, and in general, Sunderland doing pretty well, and especially defensively, and even more especially home fixtures will be very key for this side. Robin Roofs looks like a really great goalkeeper. Of course, for those of you guys that have been on Sorare a while, we will, you already know how good this guy is, so we knew he was going to do well, eh? And then, yeah, looking at the players in the side then. Reinildo, I'm not a massive fan of personally. However, if you do like him, then £4 is a pretty decent price, especially because you could sack him with Roofs if you had Roofs, so that kind of works. And looking at their midfield, I know Christopher Rigg is rated quite highly at Sunderland, so £1.70 is quite cheap for a youngster who potentially could have a long future ahead of him. Perhaps not this season though, so yeah, something to think about. Going forwards, hey, like £20, you're not going to pay that for a Sunderland player, really. Mendes not too bad for £4 potentially. Adingra not too bad either for £3. But yeah, no one crazy sticking out to me here. To be honest, if I had to pick someone, it might be Talby for £5, although I'm not sure if he actually even started against Palace. So yeah, actually not that many, not as many recommendations as I thought there might be for Sunderland, because they've actually started the season off well, but I feel like the players that have started well are fairly priced, if not overpriced. Like Makaleli is, there's better options. You know what I mean? There's better options. So, yeah, I mean, if the simple fact that I could buy, Van Heck and Verbruggen for cheaper goes to show, why I'm not suggesting to buy that, if that makes sense. So, yeah, Adingra perhaps might be a decent shout at the price, but apart from that, I'm not seeing too many great budget picks for Sunderland. Up next is Spurs, and they have my favourite manager in the Premier League, Thomas Frank, and they started off the season pretty well, 3-0 win against Burnley, 2-0 win against Man City, a 1-0 loss to Bournemouth, which honestly is not the end of the world, and a lovely 3-0 win against West Ham. So I'm assuming that the Sorare prices are going to be quite crazy for Tottenham. And yeah, 80 quid for Vicario. One of the best goalkeepers in the league, in my opinion, and the price is pretty fair. You know, that reflects in that. Romero as well, crazy good scorer on Sorare, as we know. So yeah, nothing too surprising there. Pedro Porro at £23 is pretty fair. I know he's not scoring insane recently, but yeah, Van der Ven not too bad either. I would say, you know what, my first recommendation is actually going to be Pedro Porro for £23. I don't think that's too bad, to be honest, for quite an attacking fullback in one of the best teams in the Premier League. I think that's pretty fairly priced. Udogie is an interesting one. Extremely cheap, and if you guys are looking for players that might be risky, or how do I say this? Players that might not, yeah, just risky players to buy, but could be, you know, have a high ceiling. Udogie is one of them because obviously Jed Spence is currently the fullback there. Udogie was injured. However, Udogie's usually their left back. However, and he's back from injury now, so potentially one to think about. You know, he's sort of giving Lewis Hall vibes. You know, in terms of like coming back from an injury, and being pretty cheap, fairly priced, I would say. And then looking forward at other side, I mean, I know Maddison's out for the season, but wow, £4 is incredible, isn't it? I know he'll have absolutely no utility this season, but still, mad to think that how great of a scorer he is, and he's £4, right? Mental. Kudus as well for £33 is not. I mean, I don't recommend it, but it's not terrible. It's not terrible. And then looking at everyone else, I'm not seeing the Solanke. Maybe again a risky one. Obviously not playing at the minute. That's why he's so cheap. But potentially someone to look at. So yeah, do you know what? I'm gonna say Solanke because and again, if you buy him, you're praying that he gets back into the side. However, he's a great striker, and yeah, I don't know. I mean, Richarlison has been good, but could Solanke get back in the team? Who knows? But for £5, probably worth the risk. Up next is West Ham, and they need to sack their manager ASAP. Pretty poor start to the season with a 3-0 loss to Sunderland, a 5-1 loss to Chelsea. A bit of a weird one where they win 3-0. I'm assuming that's down to Nuno. Yeah, who knows? But they won 3-0, so you can't argue with that. And then another 3-0 loss. So outside of the Nottingham Forest game, very poor for West Ham, and I'm assuming their prices are reflected in that. £21 for Hermansen is probably not worth it. Who knows? It's okay, but again, I'd probably rather just pay the extra tenner for Verbruggen. I keep going back to that because that is literally the parameter for this video. He's the only goalkeeper I think I've recommended so far. So yeah, Kilman. Again, if you're going to buy Hermansen, don't mind Kilman. You know, not too bad of a player, generally speaking. And then outside of that, Wan-Bissaka may be a decent shout for how cheap he is right now. Paqueta, just not really worth that money, is he? He's playing such a poor team. Really not seeing it. Wow, yeah, really not that great options. Maybe you would say Bowen, but just how poor West Ham have been. Yeah, if I have to suggest anyone, guys, it's going to have to be Bowen. But yeah, West Ham have been poor. Last but not least is Wolverhampton Wanderers, who kick off their campaign with a pretty rough start. 4-0 loss to City, 1-0 loss to Bournemouth, 3-2 loss to Everton, and a 1-0 loss to Newcastle. I will say, unlike West Ham, Wolves I feel like have a bit more about them. Although their results obviously are worse and they've been pretty poor, I feel like they're not playing that bad though, if that makes sense. In terms of like when you actually watch them play, obviously the results don't look good though. So yeah, bearing that in mind, looking at their Sorare scores, I know Jose Sarr is extremely cheap because he didn't play this weekend, and in general, you know, no one really wants a Wolves goalkeeper. or defender. So with that being said, we're going to skip over them. Although I will add, I will say actually, Mosquera for £1.20 might be a decent shout because he's just come back from a long-term injury, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think he's the best centre back at the club. Actually, Agbadu's pretty good as well. So yeah, he's definitely one of the better centre backs there. So someone to look at that price. Obviously back from injury now, so who knows where he could go. I'd say João Gomez is okay. Probably a bit too expensive though. Strand Larson, who knows where that man, he's just vanished off the face of the earth after interest from Newcastle. So yeah, again, not very many great picks from Wolves either, if I'm honest, guys. If I had to pick someone, I'd probably pick John Arias, even though he was benched last game. But for £3, you don't really want a defender or a goalkeeper from Wolves. Really, ideally it would be a midfielder or a forward. The only decent ones I can see is maybe John Arias or taking that Strand Larson risk. So there you guys have it. There is my review of all 20 Premier League clubs. I know you guys can appreciate that this obviously took me a long time to sort of prepare and go through and record and edit and all that good stuff. So if you guys did enjoy, then please do show me by leaving a like. Subscribe if you're new. We'll catch you guys in a future video. Peace.